Everybody ready?
Ready?
Yeah.
All right, listen.
It's your weekend show.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
With Bob Biermann.
It's great.
And welcome to your weekend show. I'm your host, Bob Biermann. I'm so glad you're taking some time from your busy weekend schedule to share it with me. I come to the microphone today with a number of thoughts on my mind. Here we are in the beginning of the month of December. And in our part of the world, in the northern hemisphere, north of the equator, the days are getting shorter, the temperatures are getting colder, as we approach that time that is called winter. Now in Florida, winters are really not that cold. They're relatively mild. That's why so many people from the northern part of the United States and Canada find their way to the state of Florida during the month of December, January, February, and March to escape the cold and snow of winter. We call them snowbirds. You know, this is an amazing world that we live in. Right now, as our days in the northern hemisphere are getting shorter and our temperatures are getting colder, there are people in Africa, in South America, down in Australia, where their days are getting longer and their temperatures are getting warmer. This world is a very stable but changing place. It's also a very diverse place. A few weeks ago, I was flying to California and back over a few days. And on a Saturday morning, I caught a jetliner out of Los Angeles early in the morning. And we took off about the time the sun was beginning to rise in Los Angeles. And as our jet took off, heading westbound out to the Pacific, we then made a left turn and a left turn again as we came back across the United States. And I had the opportunity of sitting at a window seat for those hours flying back. And I just looked at the landscape beneath me as we flew. We had some periods of sun clouds, but there were a lot of times you could clearly see the ground below, 30-some-odd thousand feet below. And for a while, we're flying over this very desolate desert. And I know from looking at the flight path, we were flying pretty much on the border of the United States and Mexico for a time. And eventually we crossed into the state of Texas. And as we were flying these many hours on that jet, I looked out the window and I watched how the landscape beneath me gradually was changing. We went from a very barren and desolate desert to farmlands. Eventually, we crossed the Mississippi River, came across the state of Mississippi, and then into Alabama and into Georgia as we were heading toward the first leg of the trip to Charlotte, North Carolina. And of course, this time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere was the season of autumn. And I could see out that aircraft window as we flew into Georgia and upward towards South Carolina and ultimately North Carolina, you could see from the air the brilliant colors of the leaves on the trees. You could see that, those reds and those oranges that you find at this time of the year in that part of the world. And I realized what a beautiful place this planet really is, and how this planet is a living planet, a tribute to a living God, and how we are given a period of time to journey on this earth. This program reaches many parts of the world. It reaches North America, reaches into South America, Australia, Europe, Asia, Africa. Just to name some of the places this program is heard each and every week. We have people that take the time to listen online or download the program and listen at their convenience. There are others that listen on terrestrial radio stations and others by shortwave. But wherever you are, we take this time each weekend and we gather together as a family of sorts, as we talk together about this journey that we share in life. I have learned over the past decade that there can be some major changes in your life. I've also learned that small decisions can make profound impacts that last for years. A decision to meet somebody can change the course of your life forever. Accepting a particular job can alter your life experience and create new friendships. Your weekend show from the very beginning has been a journey through this thing called life on this beautiful round orb we call the earth. And it's my privilege each week to come before this microphone and share some thoughts from my heart. As I was flying back from California, my mind was thinking of a number of things, just random thoughts. And I was thinking what this country beneath me, that I'm flying from one end to the other, has seen in the course of 10 years, 20, 50, 100, 200 years plus. And as I'm looking out the window and looking at the ground beneath me, 36,000 feet down, I'm thinking, what was the world like there 100 years ago, back in the year 1916? What was the world like in 1916? A vastly different place than we have today. See, in 1916, we were just seeing the beginning of aviation and airplanes. But these airplanes could not fly at 36,000 feet. They couldn't go 600 miles an hour. They were very primitive aircraft at the time. In terms of the technology we had before us, in 1916, we had the beginnings of the automotive industry. We had telegraph, and we're now beginning to see telephones in major cities, eventually coming to rural America. What else do we have? Well, we had the light bulb, had been invented several years before, and we're beginning to see electricity making its way into cities like New York and others. The phonograph, the early phonographs had been invented. We had, for at least 60 years before, we've had the basics of photography in black and white. We had the beginnings of the ingredients for so much of the technology we take for granted today 100 years later. But if you're in 1916, go back to the year 1816. There were no photographs. There were no light bulbs. There were no sound recorders. The phonograph. There wasn't even the telegraph, let alone the telephone. And if you go back another 100 years, let's go back to 1716, long before the United States. People lived in a very agrarian society. They had lanterns and they heated with fire and coal. A very simple life. And if you go to 1716 and go back 100 years before then, 500 years, 1,000 years, outside of the printing press and a handful of inventions and scientific theory, life didn't change all that much. But see, in this time that we live in here in the year 2016, as we are beginning to count down to the end of this year, look at all the technology we have today at our fingertips that didn't even exist 100 years ago. Like I say, when you go from 1916 to 1926, a 10-year period, think of what was accomplished in technology in just that time. There have been people that theorized in the late 1800s about radio and being able to transmit information through the air instead of across wires like the telegraph or the telephone. By 1926, people are beginning to have radio sets in their homes. And the first radio stations are going on the air in the United States and Canada and even into Europe. Within 10 years after that, let's go to the year 1936. 20 years, in a 20-year period of time. You had radio networks. Telephones were becoming very commonplace in homes, and electricity was reaching out to the rural areas of the United States with co-ops and projects that were sponsored by the government to electrify the rural areas of the United States. The changes that occurred in just a 20-year period of time. My father tells me that when he was a very young child in 1936, he was about 10 years of age, and they lived in the New York City area. And he talks about attending the World's Fair in the 1930s. And he saw something demonstrated in the 1930s within 20 years of radio stations being built. In a period of less than 20 years, they were already beginning to show the technology that would give us television. World War II is the only thing that slowed that progress down for about 5 or 6 years, and by 1948, just 30 years from the time that we did not have radio, most people did not have telephones. Most people didn't even have electricity in their homes in many parts of the United States, in Europe. All of a sudden now, we're beginning to see television stations coming on the air. Oh, those screens were only about 6 or 7 or 8 inches in diameter in these big wooden cabinets, but you could see people and faces and stories unfold. In time, the picture screens got bigger, and within 15, 16 years, a company by the name of RCA developed real color technology to give us color television. Those early screens were only 19 inches, but they were considered huge, and then they became 21, 23, and even 25 inches. Our world was changing because of technology coming into our homes. I cannot remember a time, I'm 62 years old, I cannot remember a time when there was not a TV set, a radio, lighting, electric lights and telephone in the house. Automobiles had come a long way from the Model T that Henry Ford had built. And now cars had heat, and in some places you had air conditioning and radios in cars. And we were also talking about putting a man on the moon. In that time, between 1916 and 1966, I want you to stop and think. The Western world had been involved with not one, but 2 world wars. We watched technology explode before our very eyes with aviation. In World War II, the first rockets were being used to send bombs and explosives from Europe to England. And within 20 years, those same rockets were sending man into outer space. And by the end of the 1960s, we were sending man to the moon. In a period of roughly 50 years, we went from having virtually no technology in our homes to having washing machines, refrigeration instead of ice in a box. And technology continued its explosive growth as the years pursued. In the 1980s, I took my first dive into the world of computers. It was the beginning of computers coming to the home and to the small business. It was no longer the tool being used in a large university or government or a major industry. For the first time, the concept of computers, it all began in the late 1970s with companies like Apple, and then eventually IBM licensing the PC computer. And I realized in the 1980s that as a person who spends a lot of his time in technology, I work in the broadcast industry, I knew that this revolution of computers, whether for the business side or the broadcast side, was going to have an impact. And I better be up to speed and be ready for this new technology to open before my very eyes. My first computer had a black and white screen and very simple. It was fairly expensive, but I was very impressed with what they could do with technology in the middle 1980s. And then I watched as the explosive growth of speed and storage and the ability of processing, it seemed to double almost every year for a decade and a half or longer. Here I am today recording this program. If I was recording this program 30 years ago, I would be in a sound studio with a large mixing console and reel-to-reel tape recorders and having to splice and edit to put a program like this together. Today, I am sitting in front of a microphone on a stand, a small microphone preamplifier, and a very basic computer. And that's how your weekend show is produced each and every week. When I started in radio in 1972, I never would have seen in my mind the technology we have today being used in the radio industry or even the television industry, because now we do our video editing on computers where we didn't used to do that. It was on tape. I've watched this massive change in my life. In the 1990s, we started getting online. The internet was opened to the general public and even the world. And people talked about online radio stations and online venues for video. And even in the 1990s, the middle 1990s, to me, it seems so far off and even far-fetched. But here we are, 20-some-odd years later. We have so much available on our computer. And now we have tablets and we have smartphones, and I can pick up my little smartphone and I can watch video and listen to audio from all over the world because I live in a part of the world that has open and somewhat affordable internet access. The technology in our cars, think about this for a moment. You go back to the 1950s and 1960s, automobiles, well, they didn't last much beyond 100,000 miles before the engine would give way and they would have to head to the scrapyard. Today, it's not uncommon for engines and transmissions to go 100, 200, even 300,000 miles because of the technology and the computers that keep everything running at their top performance. I have been privileged to live in a time where technology has almost outpaced the imagination. My brother was visiting with us for Thanksgiving about a week and a half ago. And I'm thinking he's really into technology and sometimes even worse than I am. And he has his smartphone like I do, but he also has one of these smart watches. And I'm thinking to myself, when I was a child, I used to read the comic strips early on a Sunday morning when the newspaper came. And in those comic strips was one called Dick Tracy. He was a police officer, detective, and he had all these super high-tech scientific devices at his disposal. And one that he had was a wrist watch television that he could use to talk to people with video on that little tiny screen. And I can tell you, as I was studying technology in the 1970s, the idea of miniaturized screens that would fit in a watch, it was just a pipe dream. We didn't have any way to comprehend the ability of even doing something like that. And here he has high-definition color television on the size of a watch. At his home on the other side of Florida, he has a camera mounted outside of his home. And if anybody comes to his doorstep, his watch has a little alarm, and he can see on that color TV screen who is at his door hundreds of miles away. Can you believe, with all the advances we've made in technology, can you believe, and I'm thinking now of the medical industry and the things that have occurred in my lifetime, surgeries now being done microscopically and even with robots, life-saving treatment we could not even thought of 20, 30, 40, or 50 years ago. Open heart surgery has become routine. I can remember when it was making news because it was so rare. And I've seen that in my lifetime. But with all the advances we have made with our technology, with all the advances we have made in medicine, with our ability to grow more food on smaller pieces of land, and the efficiency of a marketplace, we are still a world in trouble. We are still a world in chaos and disorder. We still have nations rising against nations. We have anger, we have terrorism, we have division. You would think with all the intelligence we have to create the computer, to create high-definition television, to send man to the moon, to send exploratory spacecraft to the edge of the universe, you think that somehow we could have found a way to make peace on this planet. Our technology advances, but our human condition remains the same. And that's what I want to tell you about today on your weekend show. You know, technology can be our friend, it can be our enemy, it can be used to unite us, it can be used to divide us. It's just a tool. But it really comes down to the condition of the heart. It really comes down to what does it really mean to be a human being on this beautiful planet that gives us life. Life is more than technology, working a job, and acquiring things. And maybe that's the biggest problem the Western world faces. We're so busy trying to acquire stuff and get money that we forget the important things about life. Where is your life at today? I was looking at my Facebook page and looking at someone I know very well that has made a couple of very interesting postings as I read them, talking about not ever missing out on the important things. And here this person is thinking in terms of, you know, if you don't say something to someone you care about, you might wake up one day and that person is gone. Life is very fragile. Life is very fleeting. But life can be an incredible journey. And I want you to really learn about this journey of life. We have the technology, but now the time has come to look for the more important things. Don't live for the technology. Don't let it run your life. Use it. Don't abuse it. Don't let it consume you. Let's find out what life has to offer to you today. This is your weekend show, and I'm your host, Bob Biermann.
That's how you change the world. That's how you change the world. All my life I had big dreams to do big things and make a change. And all the while I just passed by the simple needs right here next to me. 'Cause there's a breaking heart that's falling apart and tear-filled eyes looking back at me. God, won't you help me to see? It's the prayer in an empty room, little things we do when nobody's around. A hand reaching out to a heart in doubt. It's the smallest spark that can light the dark. That's how you change the world. That's how you change the world. A million little drops of rain can be enough to cause a tidal wave, a flood of your love that no one can contain. 'Cause there's an empty soul that wants to be known around me now that I can lead to you, revealing love that won't refuse. 'Cause it's the prayer in an empty room, little things we do when nobody's around. A hand reaching out to a heart in doubt. It's the smallest spark that can light the dark. That's how you change the world. That's how you change the world. It's the kind words, a simple smile, more than showing up, going the extra mile. It's giving everything when you got nothing left, sharing a little hope with a single breath. That's how you change the world. That's how you change the world. It's the prayer in an empty room. A hand reaching out to a heart in doubt. It's the prayer in an empty room, little things we do when nobody's around. A hand reaching out to a heart in doubt. It's the smallest spark that can light the dark. That's how you change the world. That's how you change the world. That's how you change the world. That's how you change the world.
If you look at this world and you want to see some profound change, that change really begins with you. If you're waiting for somebody else to make the change for you, if you're waiting for a politician to fix your ills and problems in the nation you live, you may be waiting a long time. Because true and profound change begins with the decisions you make each and every day on how you live, on how you treat others, doing what's right. These are the things that begin to make some very profound changes in you, the world around you, and in time as others work to make positive change, we can find the world to be, well, a better place. We really can. I want to just take a moment to remind you, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to your weekend show, and my name is Bob Biermann. I'm your host of this program each week. If you want to find out more about the radio show, I invite you to visit our website, which is yourweekendshow.com. That's Your Weekend Show, one word, yourweekendshow.com. And if you like Facebook like I do, you can go to Facebook and just search for Your Weekend Show. And if you make it one word, Your Weekend Show, you'll find us right away. And I would really mean a lot to me if you take the time to visit the webpage or visit us on Facebook, even like us, and maybe send a note and tell me where you're listening. We do this program as a labor of love each and every week to share together this journey of life. And I hope that from time to time and from week to week that we say or do something that is helpful and beneficial to you in wherever you are in this great world of ours. We talked about the ever-changing world that we live in and how so much has just radically changed in a period of just 1 century. When you look back at the 20th century, those 100 years from 1901 to the year 2000, and how technology just, took off literally like a rocket, and how that technology and the advances have continued at this accelerated pace now for 17 years. I'm seeing things now, in my lifetime, that when I lived in the 1960s and I finished high school and college in the 1970s, I never would have believed were even technically possible, but they are. And I stand in amazement of what technology may have to offer next year and over the next 5 or 10 years, the things that I'll see. And I have to wonder, years down the road, what my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will someday see that I won't. But will the condition and the heart of people ever truly change? It can only change when we begin to make changes in our own lives. I think of people that have gone through addictions, for example, whether it's drug addiction, alcohol, some other kind of addiction. You can go to the best doctor. You can find the best rehabilitation clinic in the world, and you will never change until you decide you need to change. All positive change begins with that first step to make a decision that something has got to give. Oftentimes we find ourselves in a path in life, and how we got there is not so important as how we change that path. Sometimes we're on this path because of decisions we've made. Maybe it's circumstances that have taken control over our life. But it's not going to change until we decide something needs to change. We live in a world that is so full at times of evil. I'm thinking about the story that occurred this past week about this college student in Ohio. He was a refugee from Somalia who had lived in Pakistan and came to this country. And that one morning he got up and he got in his car and he was armed with a butcher knife. He ran over pedestrians and then got out of the vehicle and started to slash them until he was taken down by a police officer. All over this world, there are incidents like that every day. It was in France, about a year ago? Somebody in a truck running over and killing hundreds. The world is a dangerous place because it is still inherently evil. What do? We make the changes around us first. We pray a lot. There are things we can control. There's sometimes things we simply cannot control. We have to learn to understand the difference of the things that we have the control and the ability to change. And instead of living in a world where we feel like we're beaten down, we need to find that place of peace inside of us and make the change that we need. This life is too short to live with anger, to live with hate, and to frankly live in the past. Life, as I've told you before, is a great gift. Oh, I know there are things we have no control. We know that there are things we cannot change ourselves. But we can be part of a positive change by being an agent of change in the world in which we inhabit, that space in where we have control. The great Protestant reformer, Martin Luther, many, many years ago, wrote what is often called the battle hymn of the Reformation. And in one of the verses, he talks about these evils to which we really can't control, but as Christians, in the long run, we have victory. I want to read that verse to you. Luther wrote these words, "And though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God has willed His truth to triumph through us. The prince of darkness grim, we tremble not for him. His rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. One little word can fell him." This is your weekend show, and I'm your host, Bob Biermann.
A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing, our helper He amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. For still our ancient foe doth seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate. And on earth is not his equal. If we in our own strength can fight, then our striving would be losing. We're not the right man on our side, with the man of God's own choosing. And you ask who that may be. Christ Jesus, it is He, the Lord of hosts, His name, from age to age the same. And He must win the battle. Devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God hath willed for His truth to triumph through us. Then though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God hath willed for His truth to triumph through us. Whoa. If we in our own strength can fight, our striving would be losing.
A powerful hymn with a powerful message, written over 500 years ago by Martin Luther. A mighty fortress is our God. You know, the Bible tells us that the name of the Lord is like a strong tower, and we run into that tower to be protected, to be saved. Our God is a mighty fortress in a very dangerous and changing world. I believe that all the problems that we truly face in the world today, I don't care if you live in Canada, I don't care if you live in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, New Zealand, doesn't matter where you live. All the problems of this world can be cured and resolved in one thing, and that is Jesus Christ. You know, where I go to church, my wife and I, each Sunday, and where I have the privilege from time to time to preach or to conduct the service, we have these words that we say at the very end of the service, right before we sing that final hymn. We say, all our problems we send to the cross of Christ. All our difficulties we send to the cross of Christ. All the devil's work we send to the cross of Christ. And all our hope we set on the risen Christ. Jesus Christ is the only true hope for this world. He's the only true and abiding hope for you. The world is never going to save you. The world is never going to truly care about you or try to meet your need. But Jesus Christ, He's the one that came to redeem you and set you free. But you're saying, but Bob, listen, you don't understand the circumstances that I'm living in today. You don't understand the problems that I have. You know, maybe I don't know your particular circumstances, but I know the things that I've seen in my life. I know the things I've observed in people that I know as friends and family, the things they've gone through in their life, some of which I'm not even sure I could endure like they have. But I know for me that even coming through many years of a difficult journey, I can set my hope on the risen Christ because I know that I have sent all my problems to the cross of Christ. I know that I have sent all my difficulties to the cross of Christ. And I know that all the devil's work that I've participated in, and we all have, it's called sin, I've also sent to the cross of Christ. Today, as you look at your life, maybe you know deep inside it's time for a real and profound change. You've tried to find a way to change your life, and yes, there are things we can do to begin to set ourselves on the right path. That kind word, doing something for somebody else to make the world a better place. But in the final analysis, until you can honestly say that you've given your heart, your mind, and your soul to Jesus Christ, you're going to have just a difficult time in life. Oh, you may be wealthy. You may have all the things the world can give. Your life may be filled with things, but you know, I have met people in my life that are fantastically wealthy. They live in very expensive homes. They drive new cars. They've traveled the world. But I've had those same people that seem to have it all. They would sit in my office when I was the pastor of a church and tell me just how empty their life really is and how they have destroyed relationships with their family because of their trying to get things. Back in the 1970s, I remember when this song came on the radio, and it was one of the more profound and kind of sad songs. But the message of that song then is still so true today. Here's Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle.
Child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away, and he was talking for I knew it. And as he grew, he'd say, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be like you. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad, come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, not today, I got a lot to do. He said, that's okay, and then he walked away, but his smile never dimmed. Said, I'm gonna be like him, yeah, you know I'm gonna be like him. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then. Well, he came from college just the other day. So much like a man, I just had to say, son, I'm proud of you. Can you sit for a while? He shook his head and he said with a smile, what I'd really like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys. See you later, can I have them, please? And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. You know we'll have a good time then. I've long since retired, my son's moved away. I called him up just the other day. I said, I'd like to see you if you don't mind. He said, I'd love to, Dad, if I can find the time. You see, my new job's a hassle and the kids are the flu, but it's sure nice talking to you, Dad. It's been sure nice talking to you. And as I hung up the phone, it occurred to me, he'd grown up just like me. My boy was just like me. And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, son, I don't know when, but we'll get together then, Dad. We're gonna have a good time then.
I know I've shared this story before, but I want to share it again because it fits so well with the song you just heard. A number of years ago, while I was the pastor of a church on the west coast of Florida, I also spent a couple of years as a volunteer hospice chaplain. One time I was called to a home not far from where I lived. In this case, there was a man that was dying of cancer, and his wife was the one that it called to speak to a chaplain. When I got to this home, it was a beautiful home. They had just purchased it a couple of months before. All this man's life, he was determined to retire at a young age and acquire wealth so he could enjoy life. And for many years, he ignored his wife. He basically ignored his family as he worked the long hours. And he put money away in the bank and saved up for that day he could retire early and move from somewhere in the north and come to Florida and enjoy the good life. He was very estranged from his wife and even his children, who, quite honestly, he really didn't know because he was never there for the school plays. He was never there for playing baseball. He was barely there when they learned to drive a car and went on to college. He was so focused on the things that he wanted for himself that he put the needs of his entire family, made them second. And the reason the wife had called me to talk to me that day was she was having a hard time understanding why she was not feeling upset or sadness or remorse at his impending death. When I think of that song, Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin, I'm always reminded of that day in that house. And I'm also reminded of something that Jesus shared with his disciples in a parable. This comes from Luke's Gospel, chapter 12, beginning at the 16th verse. Here's what he said to his disciples. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what should I do? I have no place to store my crops. And he said, this is what I'm going to do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it's going to be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. Like I say, when I think of that song, Cats in the Cradle, and I think of that day, I'm reminded of that passage in Scripture. How often are we so concerned about laying up treasures on this earth for an easy and good time? Now, don't get me wrong. Being prepared for retirement is something that I am doing at this stage of my life, of course. But it's not the obsession of my life. That man, just like in the song, put his career and his ideas ahead of everything, his family, and yes, even God. One of the changes you can make today in your life, maybe you have found yourself not close any longer to your spouse. Maybe you have found yourself disconnected from your children. Maybe today is the day you make a change.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Hey, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, the darkness. That is who you are. Hey, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You wipe away all tears. You mend the broken heart. You're the answer to it all. Jesus, you wipe away all tears. You mend the broken heart. You're the answer to it all, to it all. Jesus, yeah. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every life. I worship you. Oh, shadadabakasa. I worship you. You are here, meeting every need. I worship you. I worship you. Oh,
It seems like we just get the show started and it's time to bring it to a close. I want to thank you for listening this weekend to your weekend show. I hope that something I shared today is meaningful to you. Would you visit our webpage if you can, yourweekendshow.com. That's yourweekendshow.com. Or find us on Facebook at Your Weekend Show. Until next week at the same time, this is Bob Biermann wishing God's greatest blessings upon you.
It's Your Weekend Show with Bob Biermann.